Welcome, guys. Welcome, guys. Welcome back. Welcome into my channel. Welcome to everyone who is here. We are going to continue with the reading of Taken at the Flood by Agatha Christie. I just gotta turn the music down. We can't deal with the high music. Okay, so I'm turning the music down a little bit. Now, for those of you who have been here with me the day before yesterday, I read the prologue for this story. Yesterday, I read a part of chapter 1. So you have to be following along with me as I read so that you don't get lost in the sauce. Because if you get lost in the sauce, you might wonder what the story is really about. So this morning, I'm going to continue with the reading. We are going to continue reading the story. Now, join me, guys. For those of you who like reading but don't like to have to read for yourselves, you are at the right place at the right time as I read for you. Present Miss, here she comes. Here she comes. Oh my gosh. Welcome, sis. Welcome. We are going to continue reading the story. Oh my word. We are going to continue reading this story. Taken at the flood. I am losing it here. All right, let us continue. We are not gonna waste any time. We're going to do the reading. Yesterday we were reading how Mrs. Marchmont. We're reading about Mrs. Marchmont and Gordon Cloud, or Gordon Cloud maybe just found his age paper thinking he was going to marry this woman from South America. And Miss Marchmont was not happy about it. They kept talking ugly about the woman, how the woman didn't seem cultured. Because you see, they were rich. They are rich and they have a little bit of dough. And he had married this poor woman from South America, and they're saying the woman doesn't seem cultured. She doesn't seem like she knows much, and how she's not beautiful, and just questioning even the woman's existence at all. So we are going to continue, and I think what they're mad about is that the money, the will that he had made would have been would have meant that they would get all of his inheritance, providing that he never remarried. But he has remarried. So let us continue. And so Rosalie, gets everything. Aha, you hear what the concern is? They're concerned whether or not Rosaline is going to get all of their uncle's wealth, considering that he just married her. Yes, the old will was invalidated by his marriage. Lynn was silent. She was not more mercenary than most, but she would not have been human if she had not resented the new state of affairs. It was not, she felt, as all that Gordon Cloud himself would have envisaged. The bulk of his fortune he might have left to his young wife, but certain provisions he would certainly have made for the family he had encouraged to depend upon him. So you remember in the part of the story yesterday, Gordon Cloud made sure that his nieces had everything they needed. They could always call upon him for money. He gave them a monthly allowance. And in his will, he wanted his estate to continue to take care of them for the rest of their lives. And the only thing that would invalidate that will would be if he ever got married. And then boom, he got married. And then he died the day after. So he died the day after he returned to the country. So he was not able to change the will. And now his nieces are really His nieces are really, really mad. But that is some music I can get loaded on my head star. Okay, that's enough. Yard food is in the place, Lord. Mr. Yard food, Miss See with a breadfruit there. Oh my God, these are the things that make me miss Jamaica. These are the things that make me miss Jamaica. Because I go to Miami and they have breadfruit for like $2.50 a pound. If you still look shrivel up something them. So me no want my breadfruit. Then too little bit and shrivel up. Me not buying them. So good morning, Yard food. How you doing, my love? Yeah, nice little sky picture, right? Let us continue. Oops. Let us continue. He says the bulk of his fortune he might have left to his young wife, but certain provisions he would certainly have made for the family he had encouraged to depend upon him. Again and again, he had urged them not to save, not to make provisions for the future. She had heard him say to Jeremy, "You'll be a rich man when I die." To her mother, to her mother, to her mother, he had often said, "Don't worry, Adela. I'll always look after Lynn. You know that. And I'd hate you to leave this house. It's your home. Send all the bills for repairs to me." Rowley he had encouraged to take up farming. Anthony, Jeremy's son, he had insisted should go into the guards, and he had always made him a handsome allowance. Lionel Cloud had been encouraged to follow up certain lines of medical research that were not immediately profitable and to let his practice run down. Mm. Lynn's thoughts were broken into dramatically and with a terrible trembling lip. Mrs. Marchmont produced a sheaf of bills. "And look at all these," she wailed. "What am I to do with this? What on earth am I to do, Lynn? The bank manager wrote me only this morning that I'm overdrawn. I don't see how I can be. I've been so careful. But it seems my investments just aren't producing what they used to. Increased taxation," he says, "and all these yellow things. War damage insurance or something. One has to pay them, whether one wants to or not." Lynn took the bills and glanced through them. There was no record of extravagance among them. They were for slates replaced on the roof, the mending of fences, replacements of a worn-out kitchen boiler, a new main water pipe. They amounted to a considerable sum. "Mrs. I suppose I ought to move from here, but where could I go? There isn't a small house anywhere. There just isn't such a thing. Oh my, I don't want to worry you with all this, Lynn. Now, just as soon as you have come home, but I don't know what to do. I really don't." Lynn looked at her mother. She was over 60. She had never been a very strong woman. During the war, she had taken in evacuees from London, had cooked and cleaned for them, had worked with the WVS, made jams, helped with school meals. She had worked 14 hours a day in contrast to a pleasant, easy life before the war. She was now, as Lynn saw, very near a breakdown, tired out and frightened of the future. A slow, quiet anger arose inside of Lynn. She said slowly, "Couldn't this Rosaline help?" Mrs. Marchmont flushed. "We have no right to anything at all." Lynn demurred. "I think you have a moral right. Uncle Gordon always helped." Mrs. Marchmont shook her head. She said, "It wouldn't be very nice, dear, to ask favors, not of someone one doesn't like very much. And anyway, that brother of hers would never let her give away not even a penny." And she nodded, heroism giving place to pure female cattiness. If he really is her brother, that is to say. Hmm. Hey, when you see how people always a fight over money, especially money where them never work for, money that was never theirs in the first place. But when it come to deadlift, them always fighting. Let's move on to chapter 2. Frances Cloud. Frances Cloud looked thoughtfully across the dinner table at her husband. Frances was 48. She was one of those lean, greyhound women who look well in tweeds. There was a rather arrogant, ravaged beauty about her face, which had no makeup except a little carelessly applied lipstick. Jeremy Cloud was a spare, gray-haired man of 63 with a dry, expressionless face. It was, this evening, even more expressionless than before. His wife registered the fact that a swift, flashing glance, a 15-year-old girl shuffled round the table, handling the dishes. Her agonizing gaze was fixed on Francis. If Francis frowned, she nearly dropped something. A look of approval set her beaming. It was noted enviously in Wormsley Vale that if anyone had servants, it would be Frances Cloud. She did not bribe them with extravagant wages, and she was exacting as to performance, but her warm approval of endeavor and her infectious energy and drive made of domestic service something creative and personal. She had been so used to being waited on all her life that she took it for granted without self-consciousness. Pianist Frances Cloud had been the only daughter of Lord Edward Trenton, who had trained his horses in the neighborhood of Wormsley Vale. Lord Edward's final bankruptcy was realized by those in the know to be a merciful escape from worse things. There had been rumors of horses that had had escaped with his reputation only lightly tarnished, and had reached an arrangement with his creditors, who which permitted him to live exceedingly comfortable in the south of France. So here, Lord Edward had filed for bankruptcy because he had not handled his money well, and so he had filed for bankruptcy to save himself the embarrassment. And so the banks were in favor of him, and so not to tarnish his reputation, he took out his money and went to live comfortably in the south of France. Hmm. And for these unexpected blessings, he had to thank the shrewdness of special extortions of his solicitor, Jeremy Cloud. Cloud had done a good deal more than a solicitor usually does for a client, and had even advanced guarantees of his own. He had made it clear that he had a deep admiration for Frances Trenton, and in due course, when her father's affairs had been satisfactorily wound up, Frances had become Mrs. Jeremy Cloud. What she had felt about it, no one had ever known. Loyal wife to Jeremy, a careful mother to his son, had forwarded Jeremy's interests in every way, and had never once suggested by word or deed that the match was anything but a free will impulse on her part. In response to Cloud, in response, the Cloud family had an enormous respect and admiration for Frances. They were proud of her. They deferred to her judgment, but they never felt really quite intimidated by her. What What Jeremy Cloud thought of his marriage, nobody knew, because nobody ever did know what Jeremy Cloud thought or felt. A dry stick was what people said about Jeremy. His reputation, both as a man and a lawyer, was very high. Cloud, Brunskill and Cloud never touched any questionable legal business. They were not supposed to be brilliant, but were considered very sound. The firm prospered, and the Jeremy Clouds lived in a handsome Georgian house just off the marketplace with a big old-fashioned walled garden behind it, where the pear trees in spring showed a sea of white blossom. It was at a room overlooking the garden at the back of the house that the husband and wife went when they rose for dinner, when they rose from the dinner table. Edna, the 15-year-old, brought in coffee, breathing excitedly and adenoidly. Frances poured a little coffee into the cup. It was strong and hot. She said to Edna, crisply and approvingly, "Excellent, Edna." Edna went crimson with pleasure and went out marvelously, marveling, nevertheless, at what some people liked. Coffee, in Edna's opinion, crowds drank their coffee, black and without sugar. They had talked in the develop they had talked in a desultory way during dinner. Well, on the people, come, I never said a word there yet. And when I read and learn. I don't just call words. I read and learn as I go along. I never see this word yet, and even in the context, I can't figure it out. So let me look it up. It's desultory way during dinner. Desultory. Oh, lack of plan, purpose, or enthusiasm. Okay, that's what the word desultory means. A lack of plan. Okay, all right. Just randomly. All right, let us move on. Oh, that's interesting. In the room overlooking the garden, the Clouds drank their coffee, black and without sugar. They had talked in a desultory way during dinner of acquaintances met, of Lynn's return, of the prospect of farming in the near future. But now, of her regard, his right hand stroked his upper lip. Although Jeremy Cloud did not know it himself, the gesture was a characteristical one and incited and coincided with inner. Hold on there, guys. Hold on there. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. Frances leaned back in her chair, watching her husband. Coincided with inner perturbation. Frances had not observed it very often. Once, when Anthony, their son, had been seriously ill as a child, once, when waiting for a jury to consider their verdict at the breakout of the war, waiting to hear the irrevocable words over the wireless, on the eve of Anthony's departure after embarkation leave. Frances thought a little while being Frances thought a little while before she spoke. Their married life had been happy, but never intimate insofar as the spoken word went. Well, they weren't intimate, but they had a son. They had a son. So how much more intimate can you get? She had respected Jeremy's reserve she had respected Jeremy's reserves and he hers. Even when the telegram had come announcing Anthony's death on active service, they had neither of them broke down. Oh wow, they are really cool. Did you know they say that rich people are usually unhappy? When I went on the riverboat tour the other night, the guy gave a joke and he said that there was a house on the river, a huge, 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 huge house like a palace on the river. And the tour guide said the the wife and husband who lived there were very elderly and they had been married for many, many years. And they usually joked and said that the reason why they stayed married for so long is because the house is so big they don't see much of each other. So I guess that is true. So here so here, Francis and their husband Jeremy don't seem to be very happy. They're very wealthy, but certainly not very happy. Even when the telegram had come announcing Anthony's death on active service, no, Anthony was their son. They had they had neither of them broken down. I don't know. I love Agatha Christie novels. This one though, I I read it before and I had made notes about it. The choice of words, the way they put the words, sometimes just confusing grammatically to me. And I wonder if the person who wrote it, they have a good grip on words, but not grammar. If you know what I mean. Does that make sense? Yes. They use flourishing words, but the grammar is usually lacking, to say the least. Let's read that again. Even when the telegram had come announcing Anthony's death on active service, they had neither of them broken down. Why could they just say, neither of them broke down? Oh my God. He had opened it, then he had looked up at her. She had said, is it? He had bowed his head, then crossed and put the telegram over her outstretched into her outstretched hand. They had stood there quite silently for a while. Then Jeremy said, I wish I could help you, my dear. And she had answered, her voice steady, her tears unshed, conscious only of the terrible emptiness and aching. It's just as bad for you. He had patted her shoulder. Yes, he said, yes. Then he had moved towards the door, walking a little awry, yet stiff, yet stiffly, suddenly an old man, saying as he did so, there's nothing to be said, darling, nothing to be said. She had been grateful to him, passionately grateful for understanding so well, and had been torn with pity for him, seeing him suddenly turn into an old man. With the loss of her boy, something had hardened inside of her. Some ordinary common kindness had dried up. She was more efficient, more energetic than ever. People became People became sometimes a little afraid of her ruthless common sense. Jeremy Cloud's finger moved along his upper lip again, irresolutely searching, and crisply across the room, Francis spoke. Is anything the matter, Jeremy? He started. His coffee cup almost slipped from his grasp. He recovered himself, put it firmly down on the tray, then he looked across at her. What do you mean, Francis? I'm asking you if if anything is the matter. What should be the matter, though? It would be foolish to guess. I would rather you told me. She spoke without emotion, in a businesslike way. He said unconvincingly, there is nothing the matter. She did not answer. She merely waited inquiringly. His denial, it seemed, she put aside as negligible. He looked at her uncertainly, and just for a moment, the imperturbable mask of his grey face slipped. and she caught a glimpse of such turbulent agony that she almost exclaimed aloud. It was only for a moment that she didn't doubt what she had seen. She said quickly and unemotionally, I think you had better tell me. Right now, she sighed, a deep, unhappy sigh. You will have to know, of course, he said, sooner or later. And he added what was to her a very astonishing phrase. I'm afraid you had made a bad bargain, Francis. She went right past an implication she did not understand to attack hard facts. What is it? She said. Money? She did not know why she put money first. She knew exactly why she put money first. AG, good morning. How are you doing, my love? Because money was always on Francis's mind. That's why she said money. She did not know why she put money first. There had been no special signs of financial stringencies other than mere natural, other than were natural to the times. They were short-staffed at the office with more business than they could cope with. But that was the same everywhere. And in the last month, they had got back some of their people released from the army. It might just as easily have been illness that he was concealing. His color had been bad lately, and he had been overworked and overwhelmed and overtired. But nevertheless, Francis's instinct went straight towards money, and it seemed she was right. Her husband nodded. I see. She was silent for a moment, thinking. She herself did not really care about money at all, but she knew that Jeremy was quite incapable of realizing that. Huh. Money meant to him a four-square world, stability, obligations, a definite place, and status in life. Money to her was a toy tossed into one's lap to play with. She had been born and bred in an atmosphere of financial instability. There had been wonderful times when her horses had down what was expected of them. There had been difficult times when the tradesmen couldn't get credit, and Lord Edward had been forced to had been forced to ignominious trade. Wait, let me have to look up that word, yeah. As much as it is in the context might be. Good morning, AG. Me no late this morning. Is you late? Is you late? I already read the Bible. Because I have to look up these words. Anytime me don't know them, me have to look them up. This word is ignominious. Backside. Ignominious. Ignominious. After me done read all them books here, and I should have enter spelling bee. When I was a little girl, I entered spelling bee. This cross. But, but I could spell. All right. So this word now, there have been difficult times when the tradesmen wouldn't give credit, and Lord Edward had been ignominious, forced into ignominious straits to avoid the bailiffs on the front doorstep. Disgrace and shame. Yes, yard food. Once they had often very agreeable to play with and full of stories of his own little girl. If one had no money, one simply scrounged, or went abroad, or lived on one's friends and relations for a bit, or somebody tided you over with a loan. But looking across at her husband, Francis realized that in the cloud world, you didn't do that kind of thing. You didn't beg, you didn't borrow, and you didn't live off other people. Me and a little guilty about being so unperturbed herself. She took refuge in practicality. Shall we have to sell up everything? Is the firm going smash? Jeremy Cloud winced, and she realized she had been, she had been too matter of fact. You say it's freezing? You don't know what happened. So Francis was a little too matter of fact for her husband, Jeremy. You know, he thinks money is everything. She loves money too, but her husband really thinks money is everything. Absconded. He had some difficulty getting straight again. Then there were certain complications arising out of the position of the Far East after Singapore. She interrupted him. Never mind the whys. There are so many. They are just so unimportant. You were in a jam and you haven't been able to snap out of it. He said, I relied on Gordon. Gordon would have put things straight. Now remember, Gordon Cloud was Now remember, Gordon Cloud was always their saving grace. They would always go to Gordon Cloud to get money. Gordon Cloud would promise them that they would never be needy, they would never be found wanting, they would never be hungry because he had lots of money and he would always take care of them. But now that Gordon Cloud is dead, look how everybody's life is going to fall apart financially. Hmm. She gave a quick, impatient sigh. Of course, I don't want to blame the poor man after all. It's only human nature to lose your head about a pretty woman. And why on earth shouldn't he marry again if he wanted to? But it was unfortunate his being killed in that air raid before he had settled anything or made a proper will or adjusted his affairs. The truth is, the truth is that one never believes for a minute, no matter what danger you are in, that you yourself are going to be killed. The bomb is always going to hit the other person. Apart from his love, and I was very fond of Gordon and proud of him too, said Gordon Cloud's elder brother. His death was a catastrophe for me. It came at a moment. He stopped. Shall we be bankrupt? Francis asked with intelligent interest. Jeremy Cloud looked at her almost despairingly. Though she did not realize it, he could have coped much better with tears and alarm. This cool, detached, practical interest defeated him utterly. He said harshly, It's a good deal worse than that. He watched her as she sat quite still, thinking it over. He said to himself, In another minute, I shall have to tell her. She'll know what I am. She'll have to know. Perhaps she won't believe it at first. Frances Cloud sighed and sat up straight in her big armchair. I see, she said. Embezzlement. Or if that isn't the right word, that kind of thing. Like young William. Yes, yes. But that is, you don't understand. It's it's impossible. I'm a very responsible person. I've used trust funds that were committed to my charge. So far, I've covered my tracks. So here, guys, Jeremy Cloud, it seems, if you are following the story, It seems as though Jeremy Cloud, the lawyer, is living above his means. He is spending money that isn't his and always depending on Gordon to bail him out. But now that Gordon Cloud is dead, he don't have nobody to bail him out. So let's see what's going to happen to him. He said, I've used trust funds that were committed to my charge. So far, have covered my tracks. But now it's all going to come out. Oh my word. Unless I can get the necessary money and get it quickly. The shame he felt was the worst he had known in his life. How would she take it? At the moment, she was taking it very calmly. But then he thought Francis would never make a scene, never reproach or upbraid. Her hand on her cheek, she was frowning. It's so stupid, she said, that I haven't got any money of my own at all. He said stiffly, there is your marriage settlement, but she said absently, but I suppose and I can say you made a bad bargain. She looked up sharply. She made a bad bargain marrying to you, Jeremy. She looked up sharply. You said that before. What do you mean by that? Jeremy said stiffly. When you were good enough to marry me, you had what on earth do you think I married you for? He smiled slightly. You have always been a most loyal and devoted wife, my dear, but I can hardly flatter myself that you would have accepted me under different circumstances. So here, Jeremy is really saying to Francis, you are a great wife. You have been a good wife. But I don't think if the circumstances were different, you would have married a jerk like me. She stared at him and suddenly burst out laughing. You funny old stick. What a wonderful novel, novelettish mind you must have behind that legal facade. Do you really think I married you as a prize of saving? Do you really think that's why I married you, Jeremy Cloud? Hmm. You were very fond of your father, Francis. I was devoted to Daddy. He was terribly attractive and the greatest fun to live with. But I always knew he was a bad hat. And if you think that I'd sell myself to the family solicitor in order to save him from getting what was always coming to him, then you have never understood the first thing about me. Never. She stared at him. Extraordinary, she thought to have been married to someone for over 20 years and not have known what was going on in their minds. But, n- but now, how could she? How could one know when it was a mind so different from one's own? A romantic mind, of course, well camouflaged, but essentially romantic. She thought, all those old Stanley Waymans in his bedroom, I might have known from them, the poor idiotic darling. Aloud, she said, I married you because I was in love with you, of course. You were such a change, so different from all father's crowd. You never talked about horses, for one thing. You have no idea how sick I was of horses and what the odds were likely to be for the Newmarket Cup. You came to dinner one night, do you remember? And I sat next to you and asked you what bimetallism was. And you told me, really told me, it told the whole of dinner, 6 courses. We were in funds at the moment and had a French chef. Hmm. Bimetallism. Heard it. So I am looking it up. Bimetallism. Oh, bimetallism. Bi Bimemet. Bimetallism. Bimetallism is a whole historic word that means a system of allowing the unrestricted currency of two metals. Okay. You came to dinner one night, do you remember? And I sat next to you and asked you what bimetallism was. And you told me, really told me. It told the whole of dinner, 6 courses. It took the whole of dinner, 6 courses. We were in funds at the moment and had a French chef. It must have been extremely boring, said Jeremy. Oh, it was fascinating. Nobody had ever treated me seriously before. And you were so polite and yet never seemed to look at me or think I was nice. Jeremy Cloud said grimly, I noticed you all right. I went home that evening and didn't sleep a wink. You had a blue dress with cornflowers on it. There was silence for a moment or two. Then Jeremy cleared his throat. Ahem, er, ahem, all that is a long, long time ago. She came, she came quickly to the rescue of his embarrassment, and we are now a middle-aged married couple in difficulties, looking for the best way out. After what you have just told me, Francis, it makes it 1,000 times worse than this. This disgrace. She interrupted him. Let us please get things clear. You are being apologetic because you are falling foul of the law. You may be prosecuted or even go to prison. I don't want that to happen. I'll fight like anything to stop it, but don't credit me with moral indignation. We are not a moral family, remember? Father, in spite of his attractiveness, was a bit of a crook. And there was Charles, my cousin. They hushed it up, and he wasn't prosecuted. And they hustled him off to the colonies. And there was my cousin Gerald. He forged a check at Oxford, but he went to fight and got a posthumous VC for complete bravery and devotion to his men and Superman endurance. What I'm trying to say is, people are like that, not quite bad or quite good. I don't suppose I'm practically straight myself. I have been, I have been, because there hasn't been any temptation to be otherwise. But what I have got is plenty of courage, and I'm loyal. She smiled at him. All right, we're almost at the end of chapter 2. My dear, my dear, he got up and came over to her. He stopped and put his lips to her hair as in Hair. And now, said Lord Edward Trenton's daughter, smiling up at him, what are we going to do? Raise some money now? Jeremy's face stiffened. I don't see how. A mortgage on this house. Oh, I see. She was quick. That's been done. I'm stupid. Of course, you have done all the obvious things. It's a question, then, of a obviously. Hmm. It would have to be a large sum, and it can't come out of capital. The money is only in trust for her life. So you all know, if you have been listening to the story, Rosaline is the new young wife from South America who their uncle married just a few months before he died. And because he hadn't changed his will, and the will as it stands says they are entitled to his money if he dies, only if he has not remarried. But now that he has remarried, they don't have a say in his money. And now that they now it sounds like they're about to plot against Rosalind so that they can get their hands on the money that Gordon has left. Now they want to fight Rosalind for her husband's dead left. Let us continue. I hadn't realized this. I thought she had it. I thought she had it. Absolutely. What happens when she dies? You hear the plot coming in? What happens when Sheila and Maurice's son Rowley? It comes to us, said Francis slowly. Something seems to pass through the room, a cold air, the shadow of a thought. Francis said, Yes, didn't tell me that. I thought she got it for keeps, that she could leave it to anyone she liked. No, 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 no. That's not how it is. By the statute relating to intestacy of 1925, it is doubtful whether Francis listened to this explanation or not. She said when his voice stopped. It hardly matters to a person. Jeremy Cloud said doubtfully, We might ask her for a loan, putting it on the family grounds. She may be a generous-minded girl. Really, we know so little of her. So you see that, guy? Talking. And they are sorting through ideas about how to get their money on how to get their hand on the estate of their dead uncle who always took care of them. But now he's married to this 25, 26-year-old South American girl who now has the say so about his estate. So now they are worried about whether or not they can ask her for a loan. They're worried about whether or not if she dies now, how they could get their hands on the money. So all the thoughts are starting to circle in their minds. Francis said, At any rate, hmm, ah, Francis said impatiently, Of course not. The trouble is that it's not the girl herself we shall have to deal with. She's completely under the thumb of that brother of hers. A very unattractive young man, said Jeremy Cloud. Francis's sudden smile flashed out. Oh no, she said. He's attractive. Most attractive. Rather unscrupulously attractive. I'm a very unscrupulous man too, I should imagine. But then, as far as that goes, I am unscrupulous too. At least she's admitting that she's unscrupulous to be some way if I have to rob a bank. OMG. OMG. That's the end of chapter 2, guys. Francis and Jeremy are plotting to get their hands on their Uncle Gordon's money. That is now in the hands of his new bride, Rosalind. They are worried about Rosalind's brother because Rosalind is young She married an old rich guy, but her brother is the one who is in control of everything. And now I'm worried about whether or not Francis and Jeremy tomorrow. Tomorrow we will continue reading chapter 3. We will continue reading chapter 3 of Taken at the Flood by Agatha Christie. Come back and join me tomorrow, sometime in the morning around the same time, when we will continue the reading of this book. Guys, I hope you all enjoyed the reading. This morning was a little, uh, but but I read it nonetheless. I read it nonetheless, and I hope you all enjoyed. Target, and then when you get to the meat of the matter, when all the suspense and the emotion and and all those elements come into play, then the book becomes quite interesting. So join me again tomorrow when we will be continuing the reading of the book Taken at the Flood. That's going to be it from me for this morning, my friends. Until next time, this is Trev from Trevessence, where your journey matters. I'll be back in about 20-30 minutes when we will be doing the live Timu unboxing. All right, guys. All right. So come back and join